For 44 years, Varsity Ford in Ann Arbor has been more than just a dealership. We're a family, proudly serving yours. As one of the top volume Ford dealers in the world, we're proof that when you treat people right, they come back, generation after generation. And now we make it easier than ever with complimentary pickup and delivery for both sales and service. So you can buy or service your Ford without leaving home. Varsity Ford, driven by family, built on tradition.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Gridiron Gang, a Detroit News Lions podcast. The Detroit Lions season is over after a 23-10 loss at US Bank Stadium to the Minnesota Vikings on Christmas. It's not officially over. There's still one more game to go. The Lions got to go to Chicago next season, but their playoff hopes officially died today.
Those are over.
2 years after the Lions came into US Bank Stadium and clinched their first division title in 30 years. Just a shocking turn of events. The Lions turned the ball over 6 times. Max Brosmer, the Minnesota Vikings quarterback, has 3 net passing yards, still finds a way to win the game. Just a Brian Flores masterclass had Jared Goff and the Lions offense just in shambles from whistle to whistle. And I think that's probably where we should start. The 6 turnovers, Goff threw 2 interceptions, fumbled 3 times, Gibbs fumbled once, and all of them were recovered by the Vikings.
It was pretty gross football out there today. And I said this on Twitter at one point. I felt like last week was rock bottom when actually that was just rock bottom for the defense, giving up 230 rushing yards. This was rock bottom for the offense, turning it over 6 times against admittedly a still really good defense, a defense that's still led by perhaps the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. However, this is a game where, 16 of Minnesota's 23 points came off of turnovers. I think 3 field goals and a touchdown.
Yep.
An offense that was – I'm talking about the Vikings now, inept and just not a good – an offense that was not able to move the ball on your defense. All you had to do was not mess it up, and they royally messed it up.
The drives that you're talking about, the 16 points off the 4 turnovers, the Vikings traveled an average distance of 16 yards on those scoring drives. So basically, get a first down. And the first one came – late in the first quarter, Kingsley Aguakin in for Graham Glasgow. That's another thing we should note. Kingsley Aguakin making his second career start today in place of Glasgow. Dan Campbell saying after the game that Graham's knee was still bothering him a little. I don't know how much I buy that given the fact that he was off the injury report. It seemed like they were potentially just giving Kingsley the start. Maybe thought Kingsley gave him a better chance to win. But you got that. You have right before the game, Taylor Decker downgraded or has an illness added to the injury report. He ends up not playing. You start Dan Skipper. At one point, the Lions, after Penei Sewell got hurt down in the red zone, had Coyote Awashika starting at right tackle for them. Just to paint the picture of how bad things were and got at one point in this game.
When Coyote was on the field, it was 3 guys who started the season as reserves. Talk about whatever. Maybe they chose Kingsley over Graham this game. Regardless, he started this season and up until potentially this week was a reserve. 3 reserves, a guy who broke his leg 2 months ago, and a rookie. I mean, it's not a very good recipe for success. Dan Skipper talked about it in the locker room today. I thought Dan Skipper was very good talking about like the big picture, end of the game, honestly. I think there were a couple of quotes from him that stood out, but one that did to me was he said, the defense stood on its head today and the offense did not hold up its end of the bargain. And that's the long and short of it.
Yeah, I got the quotes here from Dan Skipper that you just mentioned. Asked, can you wrap your head around what happened this year? He said, no, that's part of the frustration, right? Like I said before, we had aspirations of doing a lot. Here we are going to Cancun the first week of January. It sucks. Asked to follow up, how's the offensive or, just general thoughts on the offensive line this year, which – Skipper was the next man up on that offensive line. I think they all kind of feel personal responsibility for what's transpired.
He's also been here a long time. Yeah. Kind of like the elder statesman along with Taylor.
He said, I think it's definitely for individual reflection. Did I do enough? I don't think I'm in a position to say what I think or not think, but also at the same time, I can only do what I can do. Part of my job is pulling some of these young guys along, and I didn't do a good enough job with that, clearly. If I can get better, if I can get these guys a little bit better every day, if I can do a little more, clearly I did not do enough, right? Being on this roster, we didn't get it done. I don't know how else to say it. I think we all need to take a good long look in the mirror after this, reflect, figure out how we can improve and give this city a team that they're proud of again, because this year was bull stuff. So yeah, some pretty intense words there from Dan Skipper, kind of reflecting probably what the offensive line in general feels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's probably fair to say that. I will say that in this game particularly, and this is to not let the offensive line off the hook, because I think the run game is you can put them on the hook for that.
Mm-hmm.
But on Goff's sacks and a lot of his pressures, I think it was Brian Flores out scheming what the Lions wanted to do. They were unblocked pass rushers coming on every sack. It felt like I don't know if there was one. The fumble probably was the only one where it was like, oh, like they just got beat. A player got beat one-on-one.
Yeah.
I mean, and Skipper kind of talked about that in the locker room as well. He said it felt like they were in zero every pass play. And he was like, we didn't push them off of that. Like, we didn't have an explosive play to like scare them into not doing that.
Yeah.
And they lived in zero, and you saw what happened.
Yeah, Goff basically saying, we thought we would eventually have answers for it. We never did. And that's just kind of the way it went. I mentioned the first turnover. So that first turnover, it happened right at the 16-yard line. They go down and that right there. They go down, they instantly punch it in. But if it weren't for these turnovers, again, like you brought up the point at the beginning of the podcast, if it weren't for these turnovers, they could have won this game going away no matter what happened with the offense outside of that one scoring drive. The only points that didn't come off a turnover, and this was, again, defense came to play today, but this was a fitting end to the season, or at least the playoff hopes. Jordan Addison, Viking or Lions kick a field goal to make it a 3-point game. Give the Vikings the ball back. First play goes for 0 yards. Vikings call a timeout before 2nd and 10, or Lions call a timeout before 2nd and 10.
Breaking the action.
Yeah, breaking the action. Both teams come back out. Jordan Addison takes an end around 65 yards, untouched for a touchdown. He got touched at like the 2-yard line, but by that point he was on his way.
And it's weird on that play, and I think for the last 3 weeks we've seen this run defense get hit on the edge over and over and over and over and over again. And to be clear, like you said, this defense came to play for, I don't know, how many plays did the Vikings run today? Do you have that handy?
Somewhere.
Let's call it, I don't know, 60 plays. For 59 of them, the defense, it felt like had the upper hand.
51.
So for about 50 of those plays, the defense felt like it was winning dang near all of them. And then they got on that one. But over the last 3 weeks, we have seen this defense, for whatever reason, surrender the edge like that on end arounds or just off tackle runs or things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
And this time, it looked like there was play action. Hutch was a little bit indecisive in which way he wanted to go. Again, I don't know. I don't know. Like, are you asking him to do too much in that situation?
Yeah.
I don't know. He was indecisive. Addison gets around that. Rock Yassin was worried about covering a potential pass, so he got baited inside. And then the safety who was filling in for Thomas Harper, Jalen Mills. Jalen Mills crashed down real hard, and it was curtains after that.
Yeah. It should be noted, this was not a good football game. This is probably one of the worst football games I've watched the Lions exist in. Not just like worst game that the Lions have played, just like worst game played in general. Like the Vikings offensively were just completely anemic. Max Brosmer making his second career start. Brosmer, if you're a podcast listener, you'll remember we told you the other day, 26-0 in his first career start. Did not play very well today. Also did not play very well. Like he had 3 net passing yards. That is the second fewest by any team in the last 42 years in a victory. He was 9 for 16 for 51 yards. Got sacked 6 times for 48 yards. Like the Lions defense was doing as much as it could, and the Vikings defense couldn't do anything. And just like the fact that Vikings offense couldn't do anything, and the fact that this game like transpired the way it did is like it was so predictable based on what we saw from this Vikings defense the first go around and how they gave the Lions problems. I thought maybe seeing them the second time around, they would patch some things up, they would have some more answers, and they were even more like up creek without a paddle.
And the weird thing is that like I agree, like the pressure is the root cause of all of it, and they didn't have answers for it. And to be clear, like it wasn't the same, like whatever the cross dog blitz that got them last time. This was different stuff that we'll have to peek into and peel back as later this week or this weekend. But I agree with you that the pressure was at the heart of it. What was the difference today, though, obviously, was the 6 turnovers. If if there of all the things that was wrong with this offense this year, and granted the offense is still top 3 in scoring, I think, after this game, but you could say the run game wasn't always there. The third down efficiency was inefficient. The David Montgomery's usage never really made much sense. Jamison Williams, the first half of the season was rather slow. All these different things that you could point to. The one thing that you could point to that was always a positive was that this offense limited the big mistake the whole entire season. They had 6 turnovers?
The Lions
or,
had
excuse me, 8?
A league best 8 turnovers entering today when they had 6.
Right. 5 interceptions from Goff, which, I mean, you throw the ball down the field, you're going to those are built-in interceptions, basically. Mm-hmm. And 2 fumbles. 2 fumbles lost, to be clear. They've fumbled other times this season. But, yeah, I mean, nearly half of your now 14 season-long turnovers come in this game, which is just to end your season that way when you were doing it so well for 15 weeks is like cruel irony.
And like I said, like the scoring drives that came off of turnovers, ones where they kept, kicking the field, or when they only traveled an average of 16 yards, those drives only lasted an average of 4.25 plays. And I think that's skewed by the touchdown drive, which was 5 plays. But like literally, they could not do anything. They would intercept the ball, and then everybody would be fired up, and then they go like 4 yards, kick a field goal, and then be like, all right, sweet. Like
they averaged
that's huge.
They averaged 3.2 yards per play, and the Lions were better, not that much better.
3.6.
But at 3.6, like neither offense was moving it well, but the Vikings especially were not moving it well.
Yeah. Big picture, where do the Lions go from here? We heard Dan Campbell say today, basically asked, like, do you feel like changes need to be made? Like, and he said, Brad and I are going to look at everything. I tweeted that quote out. It sounds like it's music to Lions fans' ears. And frankly, it's music to our ears because we've kind of been like saying over this last stretch of like, I think throughout the season, through the first 3 quarters of the season, I think you could all like find like you could still convince yourself like this is a really good team that's like that could become a contender pretty much overnight as if they can just figure out their offensive line. But now it feels like there's so many more problems now compared to how we felt about this team a month ago. And, it's going to require a lot of heavy lifting in this offseason. And they've got to be very, very careful, too. And we're going to get to all this on later podcast episodes, like off-season previews and stuff like that. But, like, they're over these last 4 or 5 years when guys' contracts, their second contracts haven't been kicking in, they've kind of been playing with a little bit of free money, so to speak. And, they've tried to plan for the future. They didn't go out and spend it all, use up all that cap. They've tried to like roll it over, plan, budget for having to pay all these guys. But now your margin of error on acquisitions is razor thin because any signing that you make this year is a whole lot more, what's the word I'm looking for?
It's like costlier, I guess.
Yeah, like it's just like bigger, and the word is escaping me that I'm trying to use. But
you have less room for error.
Yeah. And so it's like going to be very interesting to see how this goes because like they can't just like kind of go into this offseason all willy-nilly. Like they have to have a plan. They have to make a lot of decisions and they have to nail them all. Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Are they going to keep those guys around? What will be required from those guys if they do decide to keep them around? Things of that nature. Position groups like offensive line might be overhauled. Who knows what Taylor Decker's future looks like? It's going to be a wild and fascinating offseason for this team.
And even from a bigger picture, I know we've talked about this on previous podcasts. Like, I wonder, do you look into changing the defense? And that doesn't necessarily have to mean getting a new defensive coordinator. Like you could run it back with Kelvin Shepard, but changing a little bit of the identity that this defense has been for 5 straight years that we've talked about before. The whole, the cover one, we're going to play man on the outside.
Which has never been good outside of a 10-game stretch to start last season.
And, we want a guy that sets the edge on the opposite of Hutch and this, that, and the third. Maybe, the whole defensive end room is a free agent besides Aiden Hutchinson. Like, you do have the opportunity to reinvent everything. Like, if you want to go after maybe you want to play less base defense. Maybe you don't re-sign Alex Anzalone and now you play less base defense. You kick Barnes into his role and you get like a big nickel to replace Amik. And now you're like, what if you draft whatever version of Nick Emanwari is coming out this year? Obviously, we're going to get into all of that, like you said, in the next however many months we have until the draft and free agency. But those are the questions that obviously Brad and Dan are going to have to answer.
I don't really have a lot more from this game. It's pretty straightforward. The Lions sucked when they absolutely needed to be, on their P's and Q's. The playoff chase is over. And I mean, going into I'm curious to see what they do with this last game, but next week in Chicago, I mean, it's gonna be tough. Like you're gonna have to on top of this season of humiliation to have it end by going to Chicago where the first place Bears. Oh, Lions are in fourth place now. We should add
Which
that.
is bananas. The fact that they're in fourth place in the season that started as potentially, we all thought the Super Bowl was on the table. And the fact that now with 1 week left, they're one loss away from the Bears, the Bears are going to be favored in that game at home. They're at a Vegas predicted result away from being fourth place in the NFC North.
Yeah. All right. I think we're going to head out.
All right.
Thank you to everybody for listening. Merry Christmas. It's been a very long day trying to get our thoughts in order here. But, obviously this is a day where it means a lot to a lot of people. Yeah. We're out here traveling, but we just want to say thank you so much to everybody who listens. I know for a fact, as much as we don't love to be away from our families on these days, we both feel like we have the best job in the world, and you guys allow us to do that by listening, by reading, by supporting. So please go check out DetroitNews.com. We'll have coverage coming all to close the weekend, starting next week. If you want to know what's going on with the offseason plan, we're going to have a ton of content coming out on that, as well as future episodes of the Gridiron Gang podcast, where we discuss what the offseason will look like. Without further ado, I'm Nolan Bianchi. As always, my partner in crime, Richard Silva. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
We'll see you next week.